It's time to gather everything from this dying planet and evacuate to another habitable planet while maintaining enough resources in Evacuation.
And today we'll be teaching you how to play Evacuation, game designed by Vladimir Sushi and published by Delicious Games.
And hello everyone, it's Stella.
And Tarrant here from Meeple University.
Okay, let's go to the classroom.
In Evacuation, the old world is dying, soon to be consumed by the sun. The race is on to resettle. Evacuate your population and your factories, and move them to the new world to increase the new world's production capabilities. Build new stadiums to keep your people entertained, and manage the complex logistics of interplanetary migration. Whoever can best manage this evacuation will win the game. We'll first be taking you through the standard race mode of the game. Here we have the main board as it will exist after setup, and this shows on one side the old world and on the other side the new world. On their own personal corners of the old world, each player will have 9 yellow-backed evacuation bays, which are placed on the spaces showing the matching icons, and 2 blue-backed productivity markers, which are placed on these 2 ocean spaces. These represent the population and production capacity of the old world, and it's these which you'll be trying to evacuate throughout the game. The new world begins empty. This is a whole series of hexes which players will be competing against each other to settle. Tying the 2 worlds together is the progress track. Each player has 2 markers on this track. They'll advance at different rates and their positions will have a variety of implications. On the main board, you'll also find the round tracker, the turn order, and markets of the 3 types of buildings you can construct: stadiums, spaceships, and infrastructure. Each player has a player board which shows both the old world and the new world, and you can orient the board so that it matches your layout on the table. In the center of the board, you'll have a full set of technologies, each showing the same number and randomized in row 1, row 2, and row 3. This section at the bottom of your board represents your actions. Near your playboard, keep a supply of your colored population markers and your colored factories, which reduce the game's 3 resources: energy, steel, and food. As mentioned before, your player board shows the new world and the old world, and in the game you must manage these as completely separate worlds. On the old world, your resources are produced by the tokens in your evacuation bays. Anything you produce in the old world is stored on the old world side of your board. And if you buy anything with resources from the old world, then the tokens or cards you build always come into play on the old world side, with any cards placed next to your board or any tokens built placed on it. On the new world, you'll be aiming to settle your population and your factories. And as you do, you'll be increasing your new world production, which you'll track on this track. Like the old world, anything you produce in the new world is stored on the new world side of your board, and anything you buy with resources from the new world comes into play in the new world. You must never mix these up. The old world and the new world are millions of miles apart. Their tokens, resources, and cards must be kept separate. The only way to make exchanges between the worlds is on a spaceship, which players will be building during the game. As an important side note, these rules hold true when there's production or building. If an effect tells you to gain something, then you get to choose which of the 2 worlds you gain it to. I'll first be taking you through the standard race mode of the game. In race mode, players aim to evacuate as much of the old world as possible, to have increased new world production of each of your 3 resources to at least 8, and to have at least 3 stadiums in the new world. The game end will trigger once one player has reached at least 8 production and at least 3 stadiums, or after 4 rounds, whichever comes first. Early in the game, most of your resources and production, as well as a starting stadium in your colour, will be in the old world. So you'll mostly be building what you need in the old world and then shipping it to the new world for settlement. As the game progresses, you'll be evacuating the old world and reducing its production capability. And so you'll be producing and building a lot more of what you need directly into the new world. Managing this transition is key to victory. Finally, while it's important to note that this version is called race mode, the first player to reach the endgame trigger is not necessarily going to win. This is just an endgame trigger. There is still an end-of-game scoring process and any player could win. However, in race mode, practically all your points are going to come from how effectively, or ineffectively, you achieve the core evacuation goal. There are no other side objectives or scores to be distracted by. In that way, it will very much feel like all players are racing towards the same objective. That is, production, stadiums, and, as a critical tiebreaker, the happiness of your population. This is the version of the game we'll explain first. We'll then take you through the points variant and other modules you can add. Evacuation is played in up to 4 rounds, and each round is played in 7 phases. First is income. Players produce resources on both worlds, must feed and entertain their populations, and will suffer penalties if they fail to do so. Second is actions. One at a time, players will choose and take actions, furthering their goals towards evacuation until all players have passed. Third is transport. Players with spaceships load them up with fuel and resources to make exchanges between the planets. Fourth is turn order. The turn order is reset based on total happiness. Fifth is progress. Based on the total power of actions taken that round, players advance around the progress track, unlocking various benefits as they do so. Sixth is bonuses. Players gain a bonus from the bonus card if they meet its power condition. And seventh is cleanup, where you'll reset and refresh for the next round. So now let's have a look at each phase in detail. Phase 1 is income, and the first step is that each of your worlds produces. For the old world, look at your evacuation bays and productivity markers. Every icon present produces 1 resource in its colour. At the start of the game, this will be 7 of each resource. The new world produces based on the positions of its production markers. At the start of the game, this will be nothing. Next, feed your populations, based on the table on the main board. At the start of the game, you'll need to pay 5 food from the old world and nothing from the new world. By the end of the game, the new world will need 4 food and the old world only 1. If you can pay, simply pay the food. If you're ever unable to afford the full cost, you must take 1 penalty chip for each food you fall short. Finally, check that the new world has enough stadiums. At the start of round 3, you must have at least 1 stadium, at the start of round 4, 2 stadiums, and at the end of the game, 3 stadiums. Take a penalty chip for each shortfall against the requirement. Second is the actions phase. In this phase, players will take turns 1 at a time in turn order to take an action. These 10 icons on your board are the actions available, and the number next to each action represents its power. On your turn, choose any one of these actions, and then take one of these action marker cards and slot it underneath the slot where that action occurs. In the game's basic mode, ignore all the text on the other side of this card. This is simply a marker of the actions you've taken. Then advance your action counting marker 1 space and pay the energy cost of this action. Your first 2 actions are free. Your third action costs 1 energy. Your fourth would cost 2, and your fifth and beyond would cost 3. Furthermore, the cost will increase by 1 energy if this was the 4th or beyond the 4th card placed in a single power slot. This example would be the 5th total action and 4th in this column, a total energy cost of 4. For this specific energy cost, which world you pay the energy from depends upon your marker's positions on the progress track. If both of your markers are before the midway point, then the action energy cost is paid from the old world. If you have one marker either side of the central space, then you can pay the energy from either world or a combination of both. And if both of your markers are beyond halfway, the energy must be paid from the new world. I'll now take you through all the different actions, and I'll break them into 3 categories: neither world actions, either world actions, and new world actions. The neither world actions are not associated with either of the worlds in particular. And the first and simplest of these actions is this one. Here you can gain one resource, and remember, with gaining, you choose which world you gain it to. And then you may make 3 resource exchanges, discarding one resource from a world and replacing it with another. You can split your 3 exchanges between the 2 planets however you wish, but these are exchanges within a planet, not a transport between the 2. This icon, present on these 2 actions, allows you to research one tech. You have 9 techs in 3 columns, and you'll be researching each column from bottom to top. Bottom row techs require a single step of research, so if you choose one of these, simply mark it with one of your markers. Second and third row techs require 2 steps of research. For your first step, mark the left-hand side with a marker, and for your second step, move that marker to the right. Techs may have either an immediate or an ongoing effect, or both. If there is an immediate component, there will be a lightning bolt icon, and as soon as you finish that technology, resolve its effect. The icon on the left shows you which phase or action that technology's effect is associated with. There are also some techs which grant you permanent happiness. Researching tech has no cost. Anytime you gain one of these icons, you simply do one step of research for free. Next, we'll take you through the either world actions. Each of these involves spending resources and building something which can be built on either of the 2 worlds. These are spaceships, stadiums, and prefabricated factories. To build a spaceship, you may first, at most once per turn, spend a resource from either planet to discard any number of the face-up spaceships to the bottom of its deck, slide down and replenish. Then choose any one spaceship from the market, sliding and replenishing immediately. Pay the resource cost shown in the top left corner and build it into that world. Building a stadium works exactly the same way. Optionally pay a resource to refresh, choose a stadium to build, pay its cost, and then bring it into that world. To prefabricate a factory, spend any one resource corresponding to a factory tile that you have remaining, and then build that type of prefab factory into that world. The products of these 3 either world actions all have the distinction that they may be built into either world and may be transported between them. The last 3 actions may only be taken in the new world. First is cloning. Cloning is one way to populate the new world if you can't evacuate the old world quickly enough. Pay 1 food and then produce 2 population on the new world, which are represented by your player markers. Although thematically it would be physically possible to clone people in the old world and transport them to the new world, you cannot do that in the game. Think of it from a public relations standpoint. Your old world population is not going to be happy with clones taking up seats on the spaceships. This action here is to settle the new world, and this is finally how you're going to get your population and factories down onto the new world surface to begin production. Choose a single empty valid hex on the new world. To be valid, you must meet 3 conditions. Firstly, the hex must be in a biome which you are allowed to settle in. At the start of the game, that means only these white-coloured tundra spaces. If at least one of your progress markers has crossed this space, then you'll now be allowed to settle in the desert biome. If you have at least one progress marker past this space, you're allowed to settle in the forest biome, and if at least one of your markers has crossed this space, you can settle in the ocean. Secondly, if your chosen hex has settlement icons, which will be in this little black icon at the top of the hex, then you must currently have those icons available based on the positions of your markers on the progress track. Right now, pink has one cyclone, so it could settle in a space with no settlement icons or with one cyclone. Blue has one of each icon, so it could choose to settle in any one of these except for these two, which require duplicate icons. Thirdly, you must have enough population and factories in your new world to completely settle the hex you've chosen. For example, this hex requires any 2 factories and any 1 population marker, which the pink player can fulfill. Now, pay the actions cost, which is 1 steel per population marker settled and free for each factory. You can think of this as building the population's houses. Place your settled markers down onto the board and gain 1 production of the matching type for each piece placed. So the factories here produce an energy and a food, and the population produces an energy. Present only in the stronger biomes, a population space with multiple dots produces multiple resources. This settlement, for example, would be worth 2 steel and 2 energy production. The final New World action is infrastructure, and each of these building icons allows you to take 1 infrastructure action, each of which could be gaining an infrastructure card into your hand, or paying the resources to play an infrastructure from your hand. This means with a single action, you could draw 2 cards, play 2 cards, or 1 of each. Like for the other markets, once per turn you can spend a resource from either planet to do a refresh. Infrastructure represents the extensive and underlying networks of energy and transport on your new world, which is why it's too large to build in the old world and ship. Each of the cards represents a tile placement objective which you'll be trying to complete on the new world to gain additional production. For example, completing this infrastructure would require you to have settled 4 tundra hexes, which you could do in any pattern or configuration. For this one, you'd need to settle a desert hex and a tundra hex, each with a factory. So, for example, with these 2 hexes. While these have more spatial restrictions, here requiring 2 desert and a tundra in a diagonal line, and here requiring 2 forests in a horizontal line. You can take the action to play an infrastructure card from your hand at any time, whether you meet the condition or not, but as soon as you do meet that condition, gain the bonus production shown on the card. You may only score each card once, and you cannot build 2 infrastructure with the same illustration. Any cards with a duplicate in the deck have this exclamation mark. If it comes to your turn and you either cannot afford or do not wish to take another action, then you pass. Move your turn order marker out of the lineup and your turn is skipped for the rest of this phase. Once all players have passed, you'll proceed to transport. Players resolve the transport phase simultaneously, and the primary function of this is to transport resources and building on your spaceships from the old world to the new world and to evacuate the old world. You may transport with any number of your old world ships. For each ship you choose to use, pay the energy cost to fuel it from its world. Then load it up as far as you can based on its capacity. For each of these half circles, you may evacuate a matching coloured evacuation bay. In your part of the old world, choose an evacuation bay showing the same colour around its border. You'll flip it face down and put the matching resources straight on the ship. If it's population, here for example 2 population, I would flip this over and put 2 population markers onto the ship. If it's a factory, then you would flip it down and place a matching factory from your supply. Pay attention to which bays are single coloured and which are double coloured as you choose your evacuations. The next icon tells you how many factories or stadiums the ship can hold. And you can choose to load these either from the ones you've already built on your old world, or you can use it to evacuate one of the 3 evacuation bays showing a factory, placing that factory from your supply. Each player has one evacuation bay which matches no colours, and this is the only way to evacuate that. Finally, you can load the ship up with a given number of resources that you want to transport to the other world. At the same time as loading up your old world ships, if you have any ships in the new world, usually they'll have transported something there on a previous turn, you can load them up with fuel to send them back. The dead freight fuel cost is always 1 energy, even if the ship normally requires 2. Once you've made all your decisions, simultaneously fly the ships to their opposite planets, consume the fuel, and unload everything that remains into the new world. Phase 4 is turn order. Each player adds up their total combined old world, new world, and technology happiness, and rearrange all players' positions from happiest to least happy. In the event of a tie, swap the relative order. Phase 5 is progress. Each player adds up the total power of all actions they took on this actions phase. In this case, it's 2 times 4, plus 2 plus 1, a total of 11. Then in the new turn order, each player will take 1 turn to advance their 2 progress markers along this track, a combined number of spaces equal to that power. Only these green spaces count. These transition spaces are a bonus when you pass them, but they do not count as a space on the track. You may advance your 2 markers at different paces as long as there is never more than 1 transition space between your 2 markers. So here with 11 power, pink might choose to move the first marker 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and the other marker 3. You'll initially move along the passing lane, and then if you stop in a space which has an open circle, you can move your marker onto one of those circles to gain the rewards, which could be something immediate, or could be to gain the settlement icons you require for your settling actions. Only a single player may occupy each of these bonus spaces, and this means there's a big advantage to going first in this phase. You'll begin all future progress phases by moving all markers back to the passing lane, meaning that whoever's first in turn order will always have full choice from all the bonuses. Note that at 2 players, only the inner of the 2 lanes, which swaps when you reach the midway point, is available to claim. Each time one of your markers crosses the first transition, you must evacuate one of your 2 blue-backed productivity markers, simply flipping the marker over and losing that old world production with no other effect. When your second marker crosses this central transition, then reclaim one of those markers, add it to your new world, and increase each of your productions by 1. You don't need to settle this token. The same thing happens once both of your markers have crossed this transition. All of the other effects we've seen, they unlock the biomes on the new world. You must use all of your movement points up until the point where both of your markers have reached the end of the track. Phase 6 is bonuses. Check your power for the round, and if it exactly matches one of the 2 power values on this round's bonus card, gain the associated bonus. The lower powered bonuses are always stronger than the higher powered bonuses because you don't get to advance as far in the progress phase for the lower power. Finally, go to the cleanup phase. Advance the round marker for the next round and discard the top bonus card. Replenish the last card in each market. Reset your action marker and cards and proceed to the next income phase. The end of the game is triggered as soon as one player has 3 New World stadiums and at least 8 production on each of the 3 resources, with this spillover area if you reach 10 or more. If this happens during the actions phase, then all players later in turn order take 1 more action, so everyone's had the same number of actions this round. Then resolve 1 more transport phase, which is a last opportunity for players to bring old world stadiums to the new world. If the game end is triggered in any phase other than the actions phase, then the game ends at the end of the current phase. The game also ends at the end of the 4th round. Now it's time to count up your final scores. All players should set aside all but their lowest production value. This is their starting score. Lose 1 point for every penalty chip that you collected. If at endgame you have fewer than 3 New World stadiums, lose 1 point for each stadium you lack. Lose 1 point for each marker you've failed to evacuate from the old world. Finally, discard any stadiums remaining in the old world is now destroyed, and count up your total happiness. The player with the highest total happiness gains 2 points, and second most gains 1. If tied, both players gain the higher amount, and in the 2-player game, highest happiness gains 1 point and the other player gains nothing. After all of these adjustments, if there are any players with 8 points and at least 3 stadiums, then among those players, whoever has the highest happiness wins. If nobody meets those 2 conditions, then whoever has the highest score wins, with ties broken by players who have 3 or more stadiums, then the player with the highest happiness, then the player with the highest second highest production, and then the player with the highest production. If still tied, victory is shared. If you would like to add some other areas of focus to the game, you can play the points mode. During setup, after you've done your technology choices, deal each player 4 random goal cards. You'll look at your cards, choose one and hand the others to the player on your left. Then choose one of the cards you receive from the player on your right. Keep going until you have 4 goal cards, and then look at them and choose 3 to keep. Each of these will give you some sort of secondary objective to target. Here, for example, doing a lot of technology, building on tundra, or gaining energy production. You'll play 4 full rounds in the points mode. There is no early endgame trigger. And then when you're done, you'll score points as follows. Find the lowest of your New World productions and then score points based on how high that is. Score the objectives on each of your 3 goal cards. Each penalty chip will cost you 3 points instead of 1. An unevacuated factory bay will cost you 2 points, and an unevacuated population bay will cost you 4 points. Then count up your happiness, and the highest, second highest, and third highest gain 6, 4, and 1 points respectively, with, in the case of a tie, the points added up and divided rounded down. In the 2-player game, the leader scores 4 points. Player with the highest score wins. If you like to play with more competitive objectives, there are 2 other modules you can use. With the public objectives, lay 3 public objective cards out on the table at the start of the game. The first player to meet the objective on the left-hand side of a card, here for example having 5 technologies, takes the card into hand. And then during any action phase turn, in addition to the action selected, may play that card into the new world for the cost shown in the top left corner to gain the production shown on the bottom and these points at the end of the game. Then if you want the new world tile placement part of the game to be competitive, pick one side of this lines objective card, placing these markers along the spaces shown on the board. For each of the 3 lines indicated by these markers, you'll score majorities at the end of the game, with whoever has the most hexes in a line scoring 6 points, second most scoring 4, and third most scoring 1. Again, breaking ties by dividing the points rounded down, and in the 2-player game, giving 4 points to first place. There are also two small variants which work with either the race or points versions of the game. If you don't like the way the bonus phase works, you can use the generous bonus variant. Here, any player with a power equal or less than the lower value would gain this reward, and any player with a power equal or lower the higher value, but higher than the lower value, would gain the lesser reward. The other option is the advanced action variant. In setup, place one of these cover markers over the power 1 space. You're only allowed to take one of these actions per round. In setup and during each cleanup phase, each player draws up to 7 action cards and this time may look at them, then discards down to 4. Then when you take an action on your turn, you may either play a card face down under to do a board action, the way we've described before, or play the card face up and away from the slots and resolve one or both of the actions on the card, doing so in any order. Either way, you draw back up to 4 randomly at the end of each turn. Each advanced action card has its power number printed on it, so when the time comes for progress and bonuses, you'll use the sum of the powers of the cards you played face up and the sum of the slots of the cards you played face down. When you use advanced actions, use the generous variant of the bonus cards. And that's how to play Evacuation.
Thanks so much for watching. Your like and comments are much appreciated. Subscribe to see what's coming, and hopefully you have a wonderful day. See you next time.